Well, it looks like Salesforce is going through another round of layoffs. It's going to be just under 1,000 employees. But what's really surprising to me with this round of layoffs is who is being laid off. It's not what I originally expected, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The reality, though, is these layoffs should not come as a surprise at all. Channel subscribers here are going to recall that we covered this trend months ago when Salesforce laid off half of their customer service staff due to AI. But listen, you don't need to just take my word for it. Listen to what CEO Mark Benioff said at the time. He said, quote, "I need less heads. Because of the benefits and efficiencies of AgentForce, we've seen the number of support cases we handle decline, and we no longer need to actively backfill support engineer roles." And you can go watch that video right here. What was also interesting, we covered about a month and a half ago, was it looked like Salesforce maybe had laid off too many people, and they were starting to hire people back. And we've kind of talked about this trend a bit over the past few months. So again, this shouldn't be a surprise to subscribers. But what we're often seeing is companies will lay off a ton of people due to AI, and then they realize, oops, we went too far, we need to hire people back. What we've also seen is that these companies are not necessarily hiring back W-2 employees, but they are hiring back 1099 contractors, which is another interesting trend. Regardless, what I think is important here is looking at this move here, because they are going hard on this AgentForce. AgentForce is their AI agent application. And basically its promise is your entire sales team, your entire marketing team, your entire organization is going to be 10x'd in their efficiency. You're going to be able to offload tons of your work to these AI agents that work all the time, 24/7, 365. And I'm not going into too many detail, but I know some huge insurance companies that are going big into this. I can't reveal that information, at least publicly in this video, but these AI softwares, these AI agents are, I think this is the biggest trend of 2026 is AI agents. And we'll kind of cover that a little bit here in today's video. Regardless, what I think is interesting, we're seeing with Salesforce, HubSpot, even Microsoft, is this huge build out of 360-degree AI infrastructure for all your company needs. Microsoft calls it Microsoft 360. And essentially what this means is that your organization uses one primary tool like Salesforce, for example, and as long as you and your team are using it, you're going to get customer notes, calendars, emails, meetings, all of your first-party data, all of your SOPs. Everything communicates together. And then you have an AI agent, or in this case, AI AgentForce, right in the center that puts everything together. So every part of every organization is able to communicate perfectly together. And then the AI agents go and they can communicate much more rapidly. And if you think about this, I think it makes a ton of sense. As long as your AI agents are performing properly, and as long as you have good data inside of your system, these AI agents are going to be tremendously powerful. Just think about when you, for example, call with a problem to a company, you get on a call with an AI agent, which by the way, you've already done this in the past. You may not even have known it, but that AI agent is able to pull all of your history, all of your past meetings, all of your past frequently asked questions, all of your chatbot questions, whatever products you've bought and sold. It's going to know how much activity you have within your organization, how many sales you're making. It's going to have all this data in this amazing kind of central area, and AI is going to be able to push it all together. It really does beg the question of where humans going to sit in to fill out these roles. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting, and because these things might go a different way. Right now, we see these companies like Salesforce, for example, saying, we're going to be your whole 360 hub. You don't need any other softwares. We have all your AI agents. We have it all protected. It's all here. Use our calendars, use our FAQs, use our customer service bots, use our sales and marketing, data and analytics. It's all here. It's all here. But things might go a different way. One of the big things that popped off recently was this AI agent called OpenClaw. It started as ClaudeBot, then it changed to Moltbot. Now it's OpenClaw, at least last time I checked. And what might be interesting here is that organizations, instead of relying on the AgentForce within their one SaaS software, organizations might end up creating a fleet of AI agents independent of these softwares and just use their AI agents to interact with these softwares. This is something I'm really, really looking closely at because it's fundamentally going to change the way that SaaS operates. I mean, because the reality is for a lot of organizations, you're going to pay a ton of money to use a tool like Salesforce, right? You're going to pay a ton of money for these SaaS tools, but what ends up happening in most situations is you're only using a handful of the features. You're not using all the features within that software. And so now all of a sudden you're paying a ton of money for features that you don't use. You're paying for seats that you may or may not fill. And that might not be the most effective way of these softwares actually running. There's a good possibility that organizations are going to be very hungry to have reliable, safe, secure AI agents independent that can operate within this SaaS ecosystem. It's kind of a fascinating kind of topic that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. But I was listening to the All In podcast last week. I was hearing Jason Calcanis talk about how he's using his OpenClaw, and that kind of idea makes sense to me. That's something I'm going to be watching closely. Again, the key here with AI agents and with these AI systems is privacy, security, personal information, credit card accounts, and so on and so forth. Reality, it looks like this trend is going to continue of AI agents. 2026 is the AI agent year. But going back to the beginning here, what I think is interesting in the case of Salesforce is not necessarily that the layoffs are happening and that AI is replacing jobs and that companies are really putting a push on AI agents. But what's really surprising to me in this case, who is being laid off at Salesforce? And according to Business Insider, what it looks like is marketing, product management, data analytics. All this stuff sounds pretty straightforward, pretty standard stuff. These are the types of roles that we see pretty commonly put on the chopping block. There's lots of bloat. AI is really good, especially data analytics. AI is very, very good at that. But what's interesting to me is it also looks like some of the AgentForce AI product staff is going to be laid off, which to me is surprising because AgentForce is kind of the main hub. That's where the bulk of the value that Salesforce, that's their differentiators. We have AgentForce. I mean, Matthew McConaughey in your ads doesn't hurt, but regardless, that is their big promise is you get the AgentForce. With Salesforce, you get the AgentForce. And I don't use Salesforce a lot these days. I have in the past. Now I'm using HubSpot primarily with the work that I do. It's the same thing there. HubSpot is using tons of AI. It's using this 360 type of deal. And the reality is the better that AI is, the better the results will be. Now, I have an idea here. You might have a different speculation as to why the AgentForce staff is being churned out. But to me, what we've got here is just a very fast moving AI ecosystem. That's the bottom line. Things are moving very, very fast. And the people that don't adapt quickly, that communicate quickly, that make maybe bad mistakes, you're just gonna get churned out. There's just this huge emphasis to move very quick. You have to communicate very rapidly. A lot of people work remotely. You got to communicate rapidly and you have to adapt quickly. And just kind of harking back this idea, and I covered this in a video a few weeks ago about OpenClaw, this AI agent, there's kind of this tricky balance that we're in right now if you're working a white collar type job and that is that you need to move fast, you need to adapt the new technology, you need to innovate, but mistakes can be big. If you give the wrong AI agent or if you give a bad experience, there can be some dire ramifications. A good example of this would be a few months ago, all ChatGPT personal private chats were actually searchable on Google. So if you're using ChatGPT, that information actually went public on Google search for a lot of people. And obviously that is a bad thing. That is a huge issue. So it's just an interesting dynamic, and I definitely wanted to highlight it because I think what's happening at Salesforce is an indicator of what we're going to see in other organizations as layoffs continue, as innovation continues. And even if you're in AI development, nothing is sacred. And just one final thought here. I covered this a little while ago. What I think we're starting to see, and I showed some data in a video a few days ago, all the subscribers are probably aware of this, is that despite larger companies laying off, smaller firms are where the pickups are happening. So where you may get fired from your big corporate enterprise job, there's smaller jobs out there. And as some of the comments mentioned, what we want to do is get results, track the results, be quantitative, and then just continue to level up and use that to build our resume. And some people are like, well, that's the same way it's always been. Yeah, no, I get that. But a lot of times when I see resumes, they're very kind of like, well, I worked at this company and this is what I did. I worked at this company and this is what I did. When I think about a resume, I want to say, this is, for example, this is specifically what this very specific function quantitatively. Not like, well, I worked in the customer service department and I serviced 100 calls a week or something like that, but like, you know, my customer retention, if I was doing that, I would do something like, well, I was on 100 calls a week and I used AI to answer more calls, to write more emails, and as a result, we were able to decrease our response time by 50%, and I was able to increase my customer retention numbers by 25%. You understand what I'm saying? Use the tools, use data, be quantitative, and that is what's going to get you over the hump. At least that's the way that I'm looking at it. You know, for whatever I go forward next, I'll say this is how much money in ad spend we were carrying, this is how we were able to increase the LTV from various platforms, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to bore you with all that data. That's the way I'm thinking about it. Anyway, if you liked the video, smash like. If you liked today's video, you definitely should watch yesterday's video. I don't know why people aren't talking about this. Everyone's talking about the halftime show, but the real story of the Super Bowl was that it was the AI Super Bowl. Tons and tons of AI ads, and we covered that in yesterday's video. Go check it out here. I'll see you later, boys. Peace.